The wind carried the scent of gunpowder and gild. The young cowboy stood before his mother, hat in hand, eyes hollow from a storm that had no mercy. "Mama," his voice cracked like dry timber, "I killed my brother. To save his soul." The world seemed to stop. No birds, no breath, just the echo of those words hanging heavy in the dim light. Her hands trembled, her face pale as morning frost. In that silence, sin and salvation met. Because sometimes, out here in the West, a man's mercy can look a lot like murder. Before we ride deeper into the story, if the spirit of the old frontier still stirs your heart, the campfire tales, the courage, the dust, and the honor, then saddle up with us. Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you'll never miss another ride through the legends of the Wild West. Now, let's get back to the trail. The wind outside moaned through the hollow bones of the prairie, carrying with it the scent of rain and dust, two things that always found their way into the hearts of those who lived too long in the West. The old farmhouse stood still against the dying light, its boards creaking like weary sighs, its windows half clouded with the breath of 1,000 forgotten prayers. Inside, Martha Reeves stood near the stove, her hands trembling over a pot that had long since stopped boiling. When the door opened, she didn't turn right away. She just felt it, like the sudden drop in temperature before a storm breaks. Her boy had come home, but the air he brought with him was wrong, heavy, cold, and humming with something close to death. Elias Reeves stood in the doorway, hat clutched against his chest, mud streaked up to his knees, and eyes so hollow they could have swallowed the light whole. The mother's heart knew before her mind could catch up. "Elias?" she whispered, her voice a ghost of itself. The floorboards groaned beneath his boots as he stepped in, slow, deliberate, like a man walking through his own grave. He looked at her the way a man looks at heaven after he's already been denied. The clock on the wall ticked once, twice, then stopped, as if even time refused to bear witness. Elias opened his mouth, and the words that came out felt like splinters dragged through his throat. "Mama." He paused, breath shaking, fingers tightening around the brim of his hat. "I killed my brother. To save his soul." The words didn't echo, they just hung there, suspended between life and ruin. Martha turned, slow as frost forming on glass, her face paling, her lips parting but no sound leaving. The pot beside her hissed once, then went silent. Outside, the wind clawed at the door like it wanted in on the moment. Elias didn't move. His chest rose and fell, shallow, measured, as if he feared breaking the fragile stillness. Martha's knees buckled, and she caught herself on the edge of the counter. Her eyes searched his face, not for lies, but for something she could still recognize. All she found was dust and sorrow. "Why, Elias?" she finally breathed. He shook his head, a tear cutting through the dirt on his cheek. "Because he was gone, Mama, long before the bullet found him." His voice cracked again, words trembling like an old fence in the wind. "And I couldn't let him fall no further." Her hand went to her chest, not from shock but from the ache of a mother who just felt the world split down its middle. In her mind, she saw Jonah's smile, the way his laughter used to fill this same room, and then the image faded into the sound of thunder far off, rolling slow and cruel. Elias stepped closer, his boots dragging against the wood, leaving trails of dust that looked like ghosts. "He was sick, Mama," he said softly, "but not the kind a doctor could mend. His soul was wrong, twisted by something meaner than men." His words came in fragments now, each one edged with shame. "I tried to pull him back. Lord knows I did. But the preacher got to him, promised him light, gave him darkness instead. And when I found him, when I saw what he'd done, there weren't no saving him left, only mercy." Martha's tears came quiet, sliding down her cheeks, falling onto her apron unnoticed. The lamplight flickered, caught between shadow and flame, like the truth that now lived between them. For a long moment, they just stood, mother and son, sinner and confessor, bound by the silence that followed every shot in the west. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, dapping against the windows like the softest kind of judgment. Elias lowered his head. "I buried him near the oak," he said, voice nearly gone. "The one Pa planted." Martha's lips trembled. "Then that tree'll never grow straight again." The words hit him harder than any bullet ever could. He turned to leave, his hand lingering on the doorframe, eyes glancing once more at the home that no longer felt like his. "I'll be gone by sunrise," he whispered. The wind rose again, carrying his words into the night, mingling them with the thunder's slow lament, because out here, mercy was never clean, and love often came dressed in regret. The sun beat down on Dust Creek like a judgment that never ended, burning through the haze of the morning as the Reeves brothers worked the land their father left behind. The ranch stretched far as the eye could see, golden grass swaying under the breath of the wind, fences that creaked like tired bones, and a horizon that promised both freedom and damnation in equal measure. Elias Reeves, the elder, worked steady and quiet, his hands roughened by years of keeping his word. Jonah, the younger, was all fire and restlessness, his laughter echoing through the hills as he wrangled strays and raced the dust devils for fun. To the world, they were opposites. Elias the calm before the storm, Jonah the storm itself. But to each other, they were halves of a promise made under their father's dying breath. "Keep the land," he whispered, the air rattling in his chest, "and keep each other." That was 2 years ago. Now the earth felt heavier, as if it knew something was coming. Elias leaned on the fence post, wiping sweat from his brow, watching Jonah ride in from the creek bed, boots splattered with mud, a grin stretched wide across his face. "You're gonna break that horse before it breaks you," Elias called, voice calm, steady. Jonah laughed, dismounting in one smooth swing. "Ain't a horse alive can break me." Elias smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's what Pa said, do," before the fever took him. The words hung there, soft, almost teasing, but heavy with memory. Jonah's grin faded just a little, replaced by something quieter, something Elias had begun to see more often since the preacher came to town. It started small, just whispers around the saloon about a man in a black hat and a voice like thunder. They called him Reverend Cade. He'd set up a tent just outside the old church ruins, where the bell still hung silent since the fire 5 years back. Some said he came from Kansas, others swore from hell. What mattered was his words, smooth, sharp, and sweet like poison honey. Jonah had gone to listen one Sunday, more out of boredom than belief. Elias stayed behind, mending fences. But when Jonah came home that night, there was something new in his eyes, feverish, bright, and uneasy. "He speaks truth, Eli," Jonah said over supper, his voice low. "He says the Lord's tired of watching men sin without fear. Says we gotta cleanse what's rotten before it spreads." Elias kept chewing, slow, silent. Sounds like a man who likes to watch things burn. Jonah's jaw tightened. Maybe some things need burning. Elias looked up then, meeting his brother's gaze across the table. The lamplight flickered between them like a wick burning low. That was the first crack in the earth. Over the next weeks, Cade's sermons drew half the town. Farmers, widows, drifters, they all came to hear him talk about fire and redemption, about storms sent by God to wash away the wicked. Jonah went every night. He stopped coming home for supper. He stopped laughing. Elias rode into town once, just to see it for himself. The crowd was gathered around Kate's tent, faces lit by torchlight, eyes glassy with belief. The preacher stood tall, coat black as pitch, hat shadowing his face. His words rolled over the crowd like thunder. "The Lord's justice don't wait for the law," he said, "and his fire don't ask permission to burn." Jonah stood near the front, his fists clenched, eyes shining. Elias watched from the edge, unease coiling tight in his gut. When their eyes met, Jonah gave a small nod, like he was saying, "I've found it, brother." But Elias saw only the same thing their father once warned them about, the kind of man who wears faith like armor but wields it like a blade. That night, the wind picked up over Dust Creek, howling through the canyons, lifting dust into the stars. Elias lay awake listening to the boards creak, hearing his father's voice in the storm's whisper, "Keep the land. Keep each other." He knew then that one would be lost before the other. And as dawn broke red and raw over the plains, Elias rose with a heaviness that words couldn't name, because something wicked had already set its boots on their soil, and Jonah had opened the door to let it in. Reverend Silas Cade arrived in Dust Creek the way storms do, sudden, violent, and carrying the kind of stillness that comes before everything breaks. He stood tall under the church ruins, his hat brim shadowing eyes that glinted with something between mercy and malice. His voice carried like scripture carved in thunder, and when he spoke, even the wind held its breath. "The Lord," he said, "don't whisper in comfort, he roars in warning." His sermons weren't about love or forgiveness, they were about judgment, about washing sin clean in fire. The townsfolk, warm then from drought, sickness, and years of loss, listened like starving men offered bread. Every word he spoke dripped with promise, of meaning, of justice, of purpose. And in a town where men had long stopped believing in miracles, Cade's gospel felt like one. Jonah Reeves sat near the front, shoulders squared, jaw tight, drinking every word like holy water. Elias watched from the back, leaning against a post, arms folded, eyes narrowed. He didn't like the way the crowd swayed to Cade's rhythm, their faces lit by the torches, eyes glazed with hope that looked too close to madness. Cade's voice rose, and the flames seemed to rise with it. "There is rot in Dust Creek," he declared, "and the Lord demands it burned away. Not tomorrow, now." The crowd murmured, amen after amen, until it became a chant. Jonah's lips moved with them. Elias turned away. Later that night, as the brothers walked home under a blood-orange sky, the silence between them was thick. "You believe that nonsense?" Elias asked finally. Jonah kept walking, his boots crunching dry earth. "Ain't nonsense if it's true." "He's right, Eli. Look around. This town's been dying slow for years. Folks cheating, lying, killing without shame. Maybe God's done waiting." Elias stopped, voice low but sharp. "God don't need men to play executioner, Jonah." Jonah turned, his face half lit by moonlight, half swallowed by dark. "Maybe he does if men stopped listening." That look in his eyes, Elias had seen it before, once in their father's horse before it broke its leg. Wild, desperate, unseeing. From that night on, Jonah spent every evening at the tent, helping Cade set up chairs, carrying water, reading scripture out loud. He started talking about the cleansing, how Dust Creek needed to be reborn through fire. Elias tried to talk sense into him, but each time, Jonah's answers grew shorter, colder, filled with borrowed words. "You'll understand soon," he'd say, like a man who'd already crossed a river he couldn't come back from. The town changed, too. Neighbors stopped talking to one another unless it was about sin. Shopkeepers closed early to pray. The sheriff, once the law of Dust Creek, now sat in the front pew of Cade's sermons, head bowed. Even the saloon keeper boarded up his windows, claiming the whiskey had turned sour. Cade's influence crawled through the town like wildfire, quiet at first, then unstoppable. Elias tried warning folks, telling them Cade wasn't a prophet, just a man who knew how to twist a knife. But faith, once lit, burns hotter than truth. One evening, Elias rode into town to confront Cade himself. He found him behind the tent, alone, staring up at the stars like he was counting them one by one. "You're filling their heads with fear," Elias said, voice hard. Cade smiled, slow, knowing, dangerous. "Fear's just faith before it ripens." Elias took a step closer. "You're playing with fire, preacher." Cade's grin widened. "Fire's what brings light, son. You just gotta be willing to burn a little." His tone was calm, but his words crawled like snakes. Elias wanted to hit him, to knock the madness clean out, but Cade didn't flinch, didn't even blink. "You think you're protecting them," Cade whispered, "but the Lord sent me here to test them. And to test you." Elias left that night with a sickness in his gut he couldn't shake. When he returned home, Jonah's bed was empty. The wind outside howled through the valley, carrying with it Cade's voice from the tent, soft, patient, relentless. "The fire's coming, my children. Be ready." Dust Creek was no longer a town. It was a spark waiting for breath, and Elias knew that when the wind finally blew, there'd be no stopping what came next. The sun was dying slow that evening, spilling golden blood across the Dust Creek plains as if heaven itself couldn't decide which color fit better for sorrow. Elias stood by the corral, tightening the gate latch while the cattle stirred restless, snorting into the wind. The land was quieter now, too quiet. Once, the brothers' laughter used to echo between these fences, the sound of hammer and hoof blending with songs their father taught them under summer moons. But that time was gone, and what filled its place was something colder, sharper, like the sound of a saw cutting bone. Jonah hadn't come home again the night before, and the tracks of his horse were still fresh near the creek bed. Elias wiped the sweat from his brow, scanning the horizon, that knot of worry in his chest winding tighter with every second the sun sank lower. He didn't hear Jonah ride up, just felt the sudden stillness, the air thickening the way it did before lightning struck. "You fixing what's already broke?" Jonah's voice came from behind him, carrying that edge of scorn it never used to have. Elias turned, jaw tightening. His brother looked different, same broad shoulders, same stubborn stance, but his eyes were changed. They gleamed with something fierce, like fire barely contained behind glass. His clothes were dusty, his hands calloused, but it was the mark around his neck, a small piece of burned rope tied like a pendant, that made Elias's stomach turn. "Reverend gave it to me," Jonah said, catching his stare. "Says it's a symbol of rebirth. What was bound will rise unbound." Elias shook his head slowly. "Looks more like a noose than a blessing." Jonah laughed once, harsh and hollow. "You'd say that? You can't see the truth even when it's staring you in the face." Elias took a step closer, his voice calm but weighted. "The only truth I see is you letting that man twist your mind. You think he's speaking for God? He's speaking for himself." Jonah's smile faded, his hand brushing the holster at his hip, not as a threat, but as a habit he didn't used to have. "You're blind, Eli. You've been blind since Pa died. You think just keeping this ranch running will make the world right again? This land's cursed. This town's cursed. Kate says the Lord's calling us to cleanse it before it's too late." Elias's breath hitched. "Kate don't know the Lord. He just knows power. And he's feeding that sickness inside you, the one that makes you think fire can save what love couldn't." Jonah's expression flickered, something soft trying to break through, but then his joy hardened again, like a door slamming shut. "You wouldn't understand," he muttered. "You're too busy mending fences that can't hold." The words hit deeper than any bullet. Elias stepped back, his voice cracking low. "Jonah, listen to me. Whatever you think that man's offering, it ain't salvation, it's control. He's using you." Jonah's hands curled into fists, his voice rising. "No, he's freeing me. He's freeing all of us from the rot this world's become." The horses spooked at the sudden shout, kicking up dust between them, and for a moment, through that storm of dirt and light, Elias saw it, his brother, framed against the sunset, half in shadow, half in flame. The space between them felt endless, a canyon carved by faith and fear. Elias's throat tightened. "You're my brother," he said softly. "That means something." Jonah's gaze wavered, then steadied again, colder than the night that crept over the plains. "Blood don't mean nothing if the soul's already dead." He turned his horse without another word, spurring it hard toward the preacher's camp. Elias stood there long after the dust settled, staring into the fading light until it was swallowed by dark. The wind picked up, whispering through the grass like voices from graves. He looked down at the ground where Jonah's tracks cut deep, the soil cracked and dry. For the first time, Elias felt the weight of the promise they'd made to their father turn to ash in his chest. He reached down, grabbed a handful of dirt, and let it slip through his fingers. "Heap the land," he murmured bitterly. "Heap each other." But one was gone, and the other was dying slow. The sun fell, and with it, the last of their brotherhood sank beneath the horizon, leaving only the silence of the west that had forgotten how to heal. The night split open with fire. It started as a whisper, a flicker of orange against the black belly of the sky. But before long, the whisper turned to a scream, and Dust Creek woke to the sound of a town gasping for air. Flames cloaked the horizon where the old Harper homestead stood, painted the clouds red, casting long, writhing shadows across the fields. The air reeked of smoke and fear. Cows bellowed in their pens, dogs howled, and somewhere in the distance, church bells began to toll, not out of faith, but warning. Elias Reeves was already on his horse before the second bell rang, boots striking the dirt like thunder, hard hammering against his ribs. He didn't need to be told who started it, he already knew. Joan's absence, Cade's sermon the day before about cleansing the wicked had all stitched itself together into a shape Elias could barely stand to look at. As he rode, the night wind whipped at his face, hot and sharp, carrying the sound of crackling wood and human cries. He crested the hill just as the house gave in on itself, the roof folding like a dying beast. Figures moved in the glow, men cloaked in dust and faith, torches raised high, their faces half-lit with the kind of fervor that doesn't come from heaven. "For the Lord's purity," someone shouted, and the crowd answered with a roar. Elias's stomach twisted. And then, through the haze, he saw him, Jonah, standing near the fence line, torch in hand, his face painted golden red by the flames. He looked older somehow, harder, eyes fixed on the inferno like it was some holy vision. Elias shouted his name, voice raw, but Jonah didn't move. He didn't even flinch. Then a scream cut through the chaos, a woman's voice, high and breaking. "My boy, my boy." From the side of the burning house stumbled Clara Harper, her dress singed, her hands black with soot. Behind her, a small figure coughed, stumbling, a boy no older than 7. Elias jumped off his horse before it stopped moving, rushing toward them. The heat was unbearable, waves of it beating against him as he ducked under falling beams. He grabbed the child, pulling him free, wrapping him in his coat. "Go," he shouted to Clara, pushing her toward the open field. Her eyes widened in recognition. Elias Reeves? But he was already turning back. Behind the wall of fire, another figure moved, one he couldn't name, dragging a cross made of scrap wood, setting it upright near the barn. It burned fast, bright and wrong, the flames looking skyward as the men fell to their knees, praying. The sight froze Elias where he stood. The preacher's gospel had turned into an executioner's hymn. He turned again and found Jonah watching him. No words, just the two of them, framed by the burning cross, the space between them filled with fire and everything they once were. Elias's face was streaked with ash and disbelief. Jonah's was carved from stone, his torch still burning low in his hand. For a long, hollow moment, the world shrank to that single look. The smoke swirled between them, carrying the memory of laughter, of shared blood and promises. Then Jonah dropped his torch, the flame sputtering out in the dirt, and turned away, walking into the dark with Cade's men. Elias wanted to call out, wanted to drag him back by whatever thread of brotherhood was left. But his throat was smoke, and his legs wouldn't move. The burning cross crackled behind him, sparks rising into the night like lost souls. The Harpers clung to each other, sobbing quietly, their home nothing but embers. The preacher's followers began to disperse, their voices murmuring prayers that sounded more like curses. Elias stood there long after they were gone, staring into the glow. He could still see Jonah's outline in the distance, swallowed by night. Somewhere inside him, something broke. Not loud, not sudden, just a quiet, final snap, like a rope worn too thin by weight it was never meant to bear. The wind shifted, blowing smoke east toward the ranch. It smelled of pine, kerosene, and sin. Elias knew then that Dust Creek had passed its point of return. The fire wasn't done. It had just found its first believer. While we catch our breath by this dusty road, go on and tip your hat to the last rodeo. Give this story a like and subscribe so you can ride with us again soon. All right then, let's get back on the trail. The next morning came gray and hollow, the kind of dawn that didn't feel like a beginning, only the pause between storms. The ashes of the Harper homestead still smoked on the edge of town, blackened timbers jutting up like gravestones. Dust Creek was quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that came when people started choosing sides. Elias rode into town slow, his eyes scanning faces that didn't meet his anymore. Once familiar folks turned away when he passed, their whispers carried by the wind. Words like divine cleansing and righteous fire slithered through the air, and each one made his stomach knot tighter. Outside the sheriff's office, the door hung half open. Inside, Sheriff Harlan sat behind his desk, sleeves rolled, hat tipped back, nursing coffee that had long gone cold. He looked up as Elias stepped in, his face carved deep with lines of exhaustion. "I was wondering when you'd come," Harlan said, his voice rough as gravel. Elias didn't answer right away. He just took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair, and leaned against the doorframe like a man already half broken. "It was him," he said finally, voice low. Jonah was there, with Cade's man. Harlan sighed, setting down his cup with a soft clank. "Figured as much. That preacher's got his hooks in half the town now. Other half's too scared to speak up. He stood, stretching his back with a wince. You'd think after all these years, I'd have seen every kind of madness come through Dust Creek. But this feels different. Feels holy to them, and that's the dangerous kind. Elias's jaw tightened. Holy don't burn houses down. Harlan gave a tired chuckle. Tell that to the men who think God's whispering in their ear. Men blinded by heaven can do Hall's work just as easy. He crossed to the window, watching the street. A group of Cade's followers passed by, their coats still cinched from the night before, eyes hollow but proud. I could arrest Cade, Harlan said, voice softer now, but it'd take half the town with him. They'd riot. Maybe worse. He turned to Elias, his gaze heavy with something close to pity. You can't fight faith with bullets. Elias looked back, his own eyes cold and tired. Then I'll fight with what's left of family. Harlan studied him a moment, then nodded slowly. You still think you can save him? Elias didn't answer, didn't have to. It was written all over his face, in the dark circles under his eyes, in the way his hands trembled when he spoke Joan's name. If I don't try, he said finally, then what was the point of anything Pa taught us? The sheriff sighed again, the sound heavy enough to fill the room. You're a good man, Elias, but good men die quick in times like these. Gates got God on his side, or at least that's what folks think. You go against him, you won't just lose your brother, you'll lose yourself. Elias's eyes hardened, and for a brief moment, the quiet rancher looked like something forged from iron. Then I'll burn with him if I have to, but I won't let him be lost alone. Harlan stepped forward, laying a hand on his shoulder. There's something you need to understand, son. When a man starts believing that sin can be burned out of another, he's already half-damned himself. Elias swallowed hard, the truth of it stinging deep. Maybe, he said, voice barely above a whisper. But he's my brother. I'll walk through hell if that's where he's gone. The sheriff nodded, eyes wary. Just be sure you can still find your way back. Outside, the church bell began to toll again. Slow, steady, ominous. The sound rolled through the streets like a warning from some far-off place. Harlan walked to the door, watching the townsfolk gathering near Cade's tent once more. He's preaching again, he muttered. And this time, he ain't talking about forgiveness. Elias stepped out into the street, the bell still ringing, the sound sinking into his bones like iron. He looked toward the tent, where a black hat gleamed beneath the rising sun. The preacher's voice carried through the morning air, smooth, certain, cruel. Elias didn't need to hear the words to know what they meant. A reckoning was coming, and the only question left was whose soul would burn first. The night crept in slow and heavy, settling over the Reeves ranch like a blanket woven from sorrow and dread. The moon was veiled behind drifting clouds, the wind sharp and restless, rattling the loose boards of the old house that had once been filled with laughter. Inside, Martha Reeves sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling as she clutched a worn Bible, the leather soft from years of use. Her eyes, once bright with the warmth of a mother's certainty, now held only the dull sheen of worry that no prayer seemed to cure. She had always known her boys were bound for different paths, Elias with his steady hands and quiet faith, Jonah with his wild heart and hunger for meaning, but she never imagined those paths would lead them away from each other. She could feel it now, like a sickness in the air, something dark creeping between them. The same wind that used to carry their laughter through the valley now carrying whispers, ugly ones, of fire and judgment, of a preacher's gospel that turned good men cruel. She closed her eyes, pressing her forehead to the Bible's cracked spine. Lord, she whispered, her voice breaking like glass, you gave me 2 sons, one born of calm, one born of storm. Don't let the storm swallow the light. The words trembled out of her, half prayer, half plea. From the next room, the floorboards groaned under the weight of silence. She could almost hear Elias's boots pacing, the way he did when he was thinking too hard, trying to make sense of a world that had lost its mercy. And somewhere out there in the dark, she knew Jonah was staring at another kind of light, the kind that burned too bright, too false. The wind outside rose again, howling through the cracks like a living thing, as if mocking her faith, daring her to keep praying when everything she loved was falling apart. She didn't stop. She couldn't. She fell to her knees beside the bed, the wooden floor biting into her bones. "They're still my boys," she said, her voice shaking but stubborn, the same way her husband's had been before the fever took him. "You can take the land, you can take the years, but don't take their souls." The candle beside her flickered, casting shadows that swayed across the walls. For a moment, the flame stretched tall, then split into two thin tongues of light, one golden steady, the other dim and trembling. She watched, breath caught in her throat, as they danced in rhythm, separate but bound. Then the weaker flame began to fade, struggling against the draft that slipped through the window frame. She reached out as if she could protect it with her bare hands. "No," she whispered, voice breaking. "No, not yet." But the flame shuddered and went out, leaving the other burning alone. The room felt colder instantly. Martha's breath hitched, and tears welled in her eyes. "Jonah," she said softly, the name carrying both love and fear. The candle's surviving flame fluttered, and in that trembling light, she thought she saw them, her boys, standing in the corner of the room. Elias, bathed in soft light, calm and steady as ever, his eyes filled with sorrow. Jonah, half-shadowed, half-seen, his expression unreadable, the firelight flickering across his face like a restless spirit. They didn't speak. They just stood there, silent witnesses to her grief. When she blinked, they were gone, and the wind outside died to a whisper. Only the single flame remained, small but unyielding. She pressed her palms together, her knuckles white. "If you mean to test them," she murmured, eyes on the light, "then test me first. Take my faith, not theirs." Her words trembled but didn't falter. Outside, the clouds shifted, and the moon broke through, its silver glow spilling across the room. It touched her face, softening the lines carved by years of worry. For the first time in weeks, her heart eased, just a little. She couldn't stop what was coming, she knew that now. But she could still pray, and maybe that was enough. The candle's flame steadied, casting one final glow across the open Bible, where the verse before her blurred through tears. "And if one stray, bring him home." She closed her eyes, letting that promise be her final word to the night. Dust Creek held its breath that night, the air thick with gun oil, smoke, and prophecy. The preacher's stand had been replaced by something bigger, a makeshift altar of crates and barrels stacked high in the center of town, the cross behind it freshly built, its wood still wet with sap. The townsfolk gathered like moths circling flame, faces pale, eyes wide, each one clutching a rifle, torch, or Bible as if salvation had to be held in their hands. Reverend Cade stood atop the platform, the firelight licking his black coat, his voice booming over the restless murmurs like thunder echoing across the plains. "Tonight," he cried, "the Lord demands his reckoning. The sinners of Dust Creek have defied his will, and their corruption spreads like rot beneath our feet. But fear not, he has chosen us to cleanse this town, to make it holy once more." The crowd roared, torches thrust high, flames flaring wild. "Cleanse Dust Creek," they shouted, their words tumbling into chaos, faith turning into frenzy. And among them stood Jonah Reeves, the torch in his hand trembling, the light painting his face in gold and shadow. He could feel the preacher's words sinking into him like nails, driving deeper with every echo. But behind those words, another voice whispered, a softer one, worn with love and grief. Elias's voice. "This ain't God's work, brother. This is man's hunger dressed in scripture." Jonah squeezed his eyes shut, jaw clenching. For weeks, he'd tried to drown that voice out, bury it beneath Kate's thunder, but it always found a way back, threading through his dreams like a prayer he didn't want to remember. Kate raised his arms again, his voice turning low and dangerous. "The sheriff's stand is where sin hides, the last nest of those who mock divine justice. When the hour strikes, we march, and we burn it to ash. The fire shall make us clean." The crowd answered in unison, an army of the faithful drunk on fear. Jonah's stomach twisted. He saw faces he'd known all his life, farmers, widows, the blacksmith's boy, all staring at Cade like he was the Almighty himself. And in their eyes, Jonah saw something hollow, something that used to be human but wasn't anymore. He looked down at his hands, saw the tremor running through them, the sweat glistening on the torch handle. The flame crackled, spitting sparks into the night air. Lighted, Gade had told him earlier, resting a hand on his shoulder, his tone soft, fatherly. "The Lord chose you for this task, Jonah. You'll lead the fire. You'll lead his vengeance." Jonah had nodded then. But now, standing here, the weight of that promise felt like iron chained around his heart. He thought of Elias's words again, of the way his brother had looked at him through the smoke at the harbor fire, not with anger, but with something worse, sorrow. He felt that same sorrow now, eating through the edges of his faith. Cade's voice broke through his thoughts again. "Jonah Reeves," he called, and the crowd turned. "Step forward, son. Show these people what it means to serve the Lord without fear." Jonah froze, every muscle tight. The preacher's smile was sharp as a blade, his hand gesturing to the torch Jonah held. "Lead us, Jonah. Strike the match that begins his glory." The silence that followed felt endless. The firelight flickered across Jonah's face, revealing the war inside him. He saw the sheriff's office at the far end of the street, lamplight spilling through its windows, silhouettes moving inside, good men, flawed but human. He saw Cade's followers shifting beside him, waiting, eager. And then he heard it again, Elias's voice, faint as the wind. "You still got a choice, brother." His throat went dry. Cade's expression faltered for the first time. "What are you waiting for, boy?" Jonah looked up, his gaze hollow but calm. "Just listening," he said softly, almost to himself. "For the truth." Cade frowned, but before he could speak, Jonah threw the torch into the dirt. Gasps rippled through the crowd as fire sputtered out, smoke curling into the night. Cade's face twisted, the holy mask cracking to reveal something darker. "Pick it up," he hissed. Jonah didn't move. The preacher's eyes burned, then burned with them. The mob surged forward, torches flaring, their chants rising again. Jonah stepped back, the sound of his brother's voice echoing in his skull, steady, sorrowful, unyielding. The fire was coming, and this time, he knew it wouldn't just cleanse Dust Creek. It would consume it. The sky bled red over Dust Creek, a wounded kind of twilight that painted the land in bruised colors, crimson, gold, and ash. The air was heavy, thick with the taste of rain and dust, the kind that stuck to your tongue and told you something was coming, something that couldn't be undone. Elias Reeves stood by the stable, his hands steady though his heart wasn't. He tightened the saddle strap on his old chestnut mare, each motion deliberate, each buckle snapping like punctuation on a prayer. The horse snorted, uneasy, sensing the storm that brooded beyond the hills. Overhead, clouds rolled slow and black, the kind that didn't bring mercy, only judgment. Elias paused, glancing back toward the house. The faint glow of a single lamp flickered through the window where his mother prayed, her silhouette small and bowed. He'd told her he wouldn't be long, though they both knew he was lying. There was no coming back from what waited in town. Not for him. Not for Jonah. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slow, the smell of leather and sweat grounding him for a moment. The wind shifted east, carrying faint echoes of hymns from Cade's gathering, voices chanting under the preacher's command like thunder rolling across the plains. Elias clenched his jaw. "You've turned them all," he muttered under his breath, almost as if Cade could hear him from miles away. He slid his rifle into the scabbard, checked the revolver at his side, then pulled himself into the saddle. The mare stamped once, impatient, before taking the first step down the trail. Hoofbeats thudded against the earth, steady as a heartbeat, each one pulling him closer to what he feared most. He didn't know what he'd do when he found Jonah, whether he'd bring him home or put him down, but he knew he couldn't do nothing. That was the sin he couldn't live with. The first crack of thunder rolled across the valley, deep and hollow. The wind carried dust and the faint scent of fire, maybe from Cade's camp, maybe from hell itself. Elias rode faster, his duster whipping behind him like a ghost. The horizon flashed with lightning, illuminating the silhouette of Dust Creek ahead, its buildings huddled close together like guilty men waiting for trial. He remembered the days when the town meant something, laughter spilling from the saloon, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, children racing along Main Street. Now it was a different sound, the shuffle of boots, the whisper of sermons, the hiss of torches being lit. He could see them even from here, little dots of flame gathering in the center of town, a fire waiting for its spark. Jonah would be there. He always was. Elias's hand tightened around the reins. The mare's breath came in sharp bursts, nostrils flaring as rain began to fall. First soft, then harder, fat drops that hissed when they hit the dirt. The storm was coming full now, lightning tearing the sky open, thunder cracking like the voice of God himself. Elias spoke under his breath, words carried away by wind. Don't let it take him. Not all the way. He wasn't sure who he was talking to. God, fate, his father's ghost, but it didn't matter. The prayer wasn't for forgiveness. It was for time. Just a little more time before the world burned. The road sloped down, and Dust Creek spread before him, alive with torchlight and fury. He could make out figures in the square, Cade's men, armed and waiting, faces turned toward the church ruins where their prophet stood. And there, near the front, he saw him. Jonah, hat pulled low, shoulders squared, the firelight catching the edge of his face. For a moment, Elias slowed, his chest tightening. He could almost see the boy Jonah used to be, the one who laughed when the river flooded, who carved their initials into the oak tree by the ranch. That boy was gone now, replaced by something forged in Cade's madness. But still, Elias felt it, a tether between them, stretched thin but unbroken. The rain came harder, washing the dust from his face, mixing with tears he'd never admit to. He drew his revolver, spun the chamber once, and whispered, "One way or another, I'm bringing you home." The wind howled in answer, the storm swallowing his words. As lightning split the sky, Elias spurred his horse forward, riding straight into the storm, into Dust Creek, into hell itself. The rain came down in sheets, turning the dirt of Dust Creek into rivers of mud and ash, but no amount of heaven's water could wash the fire from the heart of that night. The church was burning, its wooden frame groaning as flames clawed their way through the steeple, the cross at the top glowing red like a brand pressed against the sky. The townsfolk scattered into the storm, their faith now fear, their chants turned to screams. Amid the chaos, two figures stood in the center of Main Street, Elias and Jonah Reeves, brothers bound by blood, divided by belief. The thunder cracked above them, rolling through the valley like the voice of something ancient and merciless. Elias's coat clung heavy to his frame, soaked through, his revolver at his side but untouched. Across from him, Jonah stood rigid, a torch in one hand, his preacher's mark hanging around his neck, the firelight reflecting off his eyes in that wild, fevered way that made Elias's stomach twist. The preacher, Reverend Cade, lingered in the shadows near the ruined church, his smile cold and satisfied, a puppeteer watching the strings of his masterpiece tighten. Jonah, Elias called through the rain, his voice carrying over the hiss of the fire. "It don't have to end like this." Jonah's jaw clenched, his knuckles white around the torch handle. "It already ended, Eli," he said, his tone soft, dangerous, almost mournful. "You just can't see it yet. The world you're holding on to, it's gone. Burned away." Elias took a step forward, the mud sucking at his boots, his eyes never leaving his brother's. "Then we'll build it again. Together. Like Pa wanted." Joan laughed, but there was no warmth in it, only exhaustion. "Pa wanted righteousness. Cade showed me what that means." Elias shook his head. "Cade showed you nothing but hate dressed up in holy words. He's using you, Jonah. He don't care about salvation. He just wants power." Lightning flashed, and for a heartbeat, the preacher's grin glimmered in the dark. Jonah's face twisted. "You call it power. I call it truth." Elias's voice rose, carried by the storm. "Rook don't leave mothers praying over ashes. Root don't make brothers point guns at each other." Jonah hesitated, his torch lowering an inch. The crowd, what was left of it, held its breath, faces pale behind sheets of rain. Somewhere behind them, a horse neighed and broke free, the sound like a cry for mercy. Elias stepped closer, hands raised. "You're still my brother. That don't change, no matter how much Cade's filled your head. Come home, Jonah. Please." Jonah's lips trembled. For the briefest moment, Elias saw it, the boy who used to skip stones down by the creek, the boy who'd cried when their father died, who'd sworn to keep the land safe. But then the preacher's voice slid through the storm, low and serpentine. "He's lying to you, Jonah. He fears the flame because he knows it's purer than him." Jonah's eyes flared, and the torch lifted again. "He ain't wrong, Eli," he whispered. "Home's already gone." He threw the torch toward the church steps, and the flames roared higher, devouring the rain, devouring reason. Elias's chest tightened. "Then I'll build a new one," he said, voice breaking. "Even if I gotta build it out of the ashes." Cade stepped out from the shadows now, slow, deliberate, his black coat gleaming with water. "There's no rebuilding," he said, his tone almost kind. "Only cleansing." Elias drew his revolver, the sound of the hammer clicking back cutting through the thunder. "You've done enough cleansing for one lifetime, preacher." Cade smirked. "Careful, boy. You point the gun long enough, you start seeing your own reflection in the barrel." Jonah moved between them, hand outstretched. "Stop. Both of you." His voice cracked under the weight of it all. Faith, guilt, love. The rain pounded harder, steam rising from the burning church as wood gave way and the cross collapsed, crashing down between them with a hiss that silenced everything. For a moment, the world stood still, Elias, Jonah, and Cade frozen in the light of ruin. Then Jonah turned, looking at his brother through the smoke, his eyes soft but hollow. "You can't save me," he said. Elias's reply came like a prayer carved from pain. "Doesn't mean I'll stop trying." The thunder rolled again, and in its echo, destiny moved closer, slow and sure, like the last toll of a funeral bell. While we catch our breath by this dusty road, go on and tip your hat to the last rodeo. Give this story a like, and subscribe so you can ride with us again soon. All right then, let's get back on the trail. The storm had found its voice now, howling across Dust Creek like the wrath of every ghost buried beneath its soil. The church was almost gone, its frame collapsing in showers of embers, the cross at its peak a blazing wound against the night. Thunder cracked overhead, lightning spilling across the sky, casting wild, trembling light over the scene below. Elias standing in the street, soaked to the bone, eyes locked on his brother, Jonah, trembling, his hand wrapped tight around the grip of his revolver, and Reverend Cade, black hat low, lips twisted in the smile of a serpent who knew he'd already won. "The time's come, Jonah," Cade said, voice cutting through the storm, sharp as a blade. "Prove your faith. Show the Lord you ain't just words and tears. End this sinner's deceit." His finger pointed toward Elias like a curse. Jonah's breathing quickened, rain streaming down his face, mixing with sweat, with guilt, with confusion. His revolver shook in his grip. "I can't," he muttered, voice cracking. "He's my brother." Cade's smile deepened, his eyes burning with false light. Cain and Abel were brothers too. One was chosen, one was not. "Do you think faith comes cheap, boy? It demands blood." Elias took a step forward, slow, steady, mud pulling at his boots. "Don't listen to him, Jonah," he said, voice calm though his heart thundered. "You don't owe him a damn thing." Cade turned his glare toward Elias, that preacher's charm sliding into venom. "You speak of death, yet you're the one who's damned this town with your defiance. Dust Creek rotted under men like you, men who think mercy's stronger than fire." Elias met his stare and didn't blink. "Mercy's the only thing that's ever stopped a fire from burning the whole world down." Cade's jaw tightened, but his tone turned silky again, serpentine. "He mocks you, Jonah. He mocks the Lord. You gonna let him do that and still call yourself reborn?" Jonah's chest rose and fell faster now. His eyes darted between them, the preacher's shadow and his brother's light. "Jonah," Elias said, softer now, almost a whisper against the rain. "You remember Pa's words? He said we keep each other, even when it hurts, even when it don't make sense. You don't need to do this." The gun wavered. Cade's patience snapped. "Do it, boy," he thundered, voice breaking like the sky itself. Jonah flinched, his finger twitching near the trigger. Elias saw it, saw the war inside his brother's eyes, and in that moment, he made his choice. He let the revolver in his own hand fall to the mud with a dull thud. The sound was small, but it carried like a bell tolling at a funeral. "If it's my blood he wants," Elias said quietly, spreading his arms wide, "then let him take it. I ain't afraid to die for you, Jonah, but I won't die hating you." Jonah's hand trembled, his lips parting, tears mixing with rain. "Eli, Cade stepped closer, fury twisting his face. "You weak, stammering fool. You think salvation waits for the hesitant?" He raised his own pistol, the black barrel glinting in the firelight. "Then I'll show you how faith is proven." The moment stretched, long and fragile as glass. Joanna froze, eyes wide. Elias didn't move. The thunder rolled, the rain hissed, and in that silence, the world itself seemed to hold its breath. Then came the sound, one single shot, sharp and final. Cade staggered, his hat flying from his head as a crimson bloom spread across his chest. He fell to his knees, eyes wide with disbelief, mouth shaping silent scripture that no god would claim. The pistol slipped from his hand and clattered against the stones. Behind him, Jonah stood motionless, staring, smoke rising from the barrel of his brother's fallen revolver. Elias hadn't even meant to pull it. He'd dropped it, but instinct had guided his hand before it hit the ground. His breath came shallow as he lowered it again. Eyes locked on Jonah's. "He was gonna kill you," Elias said, voice shaking, rain washing blood from his fingers. Jonah didn't answer. He just stared at the fallen preacher, at the man who'd promised him light and led him straight into darkness. Then his knees buckled, and he fell into the mud, sobbing, the rain beating down as if trying to baptize. "I'm clean." Elias took a slow step forward, then another, kneeling beside him. He didn't speak. There were no words big enough for what had just happened. The fire crackled behind them, thunder still echoing like a hymn for the damned. For the first time, the preacher's voice was silent, and all that remained between the brothers was the sound of rain, washing away what little innocence the West had left. The rain kept coming, a hard, cleansing drum that pounded the streets and spat against burning timber. But it could not drown the sudden roar of chaos that followed Cade's fall. His body hit the muddy ground with a sick, final thud, and for a heartbeat the whole world seemed to hang on that sound, as if the town itself were deciding whether to breathe or to break. Then the crowd snapped. Some cried out in terror, others dropped to their knees and prayed like the devil had been slain, voices tangling into a jagged chorus of fear and worship. And through it all, Jonah sat on his heels in the mud beside the preacher's ruined form, hands slick with rain and something darker, his breath coming in ragged gasps, eyes huge and glassy, the torchlight painting his face in red and shadow. He reached out as if to touch the man who'd led him, fingers trembling, and whispered, soft as a confession and sharp as a blade, "You killed him." Elias didn't move right away. He stood with the dropped revolver in one hand, rain drumming his coat, heart pounding like a trapped horse against his ribs, and when he answered it was as if the words had been pulled out of him by a wire. "No. I stopped him from killing you." The sentence landed between them and shattered whatever fragile hush remained, because the truth was a blade that cut both ways, and the crowd's reaction split like lightning. Some raised their hands to heaven and wailed that God had struck down a false prophet. Others screamed betrayal, convinced the sheriff would now ride in and take them for murderers, while a smaller, stunned few simply stared, caught in the unglamorous, human aftermath of a man's life ending in a puddle of mud. Jonah's face folded inward, confessions and accusations tangling until they became indistinguishable. His lips moved but no sound came, only a small, desperate sob that felt obscene against the rain. "He told me truth," Jonah gasped, as if arguing with the corpse could fix the pieces in his chest. "Said the land was cursed. Said sin had to be burned out." Elias stepped closer, hands open and useless, wanting to touch him and afraid the contact would scorch. "He told your lies," Elias said, voice low and wrecked. "He used your hunger to feed himself. He said you to match his sermon and called it mercy." Around them, the mob's mood curdled. Men who'd marched with torches minutes before now jostled, knives glinting, temperance like tinder ready to ignite anew. Sheriff Harlan pushed through, hat soaked, face carved by lines that had seen too many funerals, and he barked for calm. His voice trembled. He knelt, checked the preacher's throat for a pulse he knew wouldn't be there, then looked up at Elias with something like apology in his eyes. "You did what you had to," Harlan said, and the words were both shield and accusation. Jonah looked from the sheriff to Elias, confusion and grief tearing his features into pieces. "You saved me by killing him," he muttered, as if making the impossible arithmetic of salvation and murder add up could stitch his soul whole. "Then you damned us both." The ideal ended heavy. Elias had ended a life to stop a death that would have been worse. But had he not also extinguished any chance the preacher might have been reformed, however small? Had the bullet that stopped a blade also cut a path neither brother could walk back from? Around them, a woman screamed and someone cursed, and a child began to cry, the sound raw in the night. Jonah pushed himself up, mud sliding off his knees, hands clasped together like a man trying to hold himself from unraveling, and he leaned over Cade's body, face collapsing into something like prayer and mourning all at once. Why? He begged into the rain, not asking God but asking the world, or perhaps himself, why salvation had to be paid in blood. Elias fell to his knees across from Jonah, the rain washing the ash and smoke from his cheeks, and in that mud streak, holy desecrated center of Dust Creek, the two brothers looked at each other and saw not enemies but wreckage, two lives mangled by the same outrageous love that had once bound them to their father's dying command, keep the land, keep each other. And now one had kept the land by killing what threatened it, and the other had lost himself to belief and to grief, and neither answer satisfied. The storm rolled on, indifferent, as the town slowly rebuilt its shape around a fresh wound. And the question that would haunt them both, what price is salvation, and who gets to decide, hung in the air like smoke that would never fully clear. The mob flipped like a coin and landed on fury. Torches became teeth, voices braided into a raw, hungry roar. And the square of Dust Creek felt less like a town than an altar where men had come to trade 1,000 small mercies for one big sin. Yet in the middle of that clamor, Jonah Reeves did the thing that cleaved the night. He lifted his revolver not at his brother, not at the preacher, but to his own temple, hands trembling as though the metal might answer the questions carved into his bones. For a breath the rain seemed to hold, the world inhaled, and Elias saw the whole of his brother in a single, terrible frame. The boy who'd chased frogs along the creek, the man who vowed to keep the land, the shape of a soul bent by a voice that promised purity through fire. Elias lunged before thought could finish its prayer, catching Jonah by the wrist with rough hands that once steadied a plow and now shook with urgency. No, he said, the word Rabbon, and then grabbed the barrel, the grip, anything that kept the gun from the end its owner sought. Jonah's eyes were a furnace, bright and hollow. And when he spoke, it was not to the crowd but to the space between them where everything that mattered still lived. Only one of us walks away clean, he whispered, voice small but absolute, like a sentence carved into wood. Elias felt the ground drop. Clean of what? Of guilt? Of love? Of consequence? He pressed his forehead to Jonah's, rain melting into hair, feeling the heat of fevered conviction meet the cold of desperate mercy. Around them the mob surged. Some jeering, some weeping, some already hunting for scapegoats. But for that sliver of time the two brothers were islands. Elias begged, fingers tightening on Jonah's wrist until the gun bit into his palm. He offered every memory that might pull his brother back. The smell of their paused tobacco, the scrape of a knife on the fence gate, the vow whispered over a dying man's breath, keep the land, keep each other. Jonah's laugh when it came was a broken thing, incredulous and full of sorrow. You can't fix what's been said, he breathed. You trying to save me just damns us both. His thumb trembled, the revolver's hammer quivering like a held heart. Elias had one thought then. If a man must be taken, let it not be by his own hand in a school full of hungry saints. He pushed with everything he had, love, fury, memory, and the gun's trajectory moved, a tiny, imperfect arc. And then the shot slashed through the rain. Jonah's body folded into Elias's arms as if the ground itself drew him in. Elias caught him, a desperate cradle of mud and blood and rain, the sound of life collapsing into silence ringing louder than any sermon. The blood was hot and quick between Elias's fingers, bright against the dirt. It ran into the ruts of the street and the rain tried, futilely, to wash it away. Around them the crowd's noise splintered, a scream that could have been a prayer, a shout that could have been accusation. A woman keening like a thing undone. Elias held Joanna to his chest, feeling the stutter of breath become less and then still, and he talked to him in the only language that had ever meant anything, simple, plain words that smelled of barns and basements and the small mercies of childhood. Stay with me, brother. Don't go. Please. Joanna's eyes opened once, unfocused but real, and for a second something like old softness returned, like a boy peeking from behind a man's storm. He tried to shape a smile, and it cracked into something that might have been apology or gratitude. His fingers found Elias's coat then loosened, and his lips made the smallest shape. Maybe forgive, maybe save the syllable buried under clots of rain and blood. Then he folded entirely, and Elias felt the weight of him like a verdict. Sheriff Harlan and 2 others surged through the press, wet coats, faces stung by what they saw. Harlan reached for Jonah and checked, voice low and unbelieving. "He's..." But the rest of the sentence was swallowed by the rain. Men who had yelled for retribution now stood gaping, the shape of their righteous heat cooled by the sudden, terrible human cost. Elias pressed his forehead to Jonah's, feeling the last shallow hitch of breath fade. And when he spoke, it was not to the crowd but to the brother who had been everything and then not. "You're not alone." The words were a promise and a confession. They soaked into the night as torches guttered and the rain fell harder, as if the sky itself tried to baptize what this land and these men had become. Around them, Dusk Creek rearranged itself. No sermon could unmake what had happened, yet in that small, mud-streaked moment Elias held Jonah and understood with a clarity that seared him. Salvation, when bought in blood, leaves no one clean. The road home felt longer on this second day, as if the plains themselves had stretched out in sympathy with the weight Elias carried. The chestnut mare moved with slow, careful steps, hooves sinking into ruts the rain had hollowed, and across her back Joanna lay draped like a faded banner, his boots crossed at the ankles, hands pale against his chest, face turned half to the sky as though searching for a sun that no longer shone for him. Elias rode in silence, coat heavy with mud and rain, the town shrinking behind him into a smear of smoke and memory until the open fields of the Reeves place opened up and the oak they'd climbed as boys rose like an old friend against the horizon, its branches hollowed by years but still holding the scars where 2 small hands had once carved initials and promises. The house looked unchanged and yet everything in it had shifted. Martha's kitchen light stood like a solitary lighthouse, and when he eased down from the saddle the world felt sudden and thin, like tissue stretched over a wound. He slid Jonah from the mare with hands that trembled but did not refuse the work, the body lighter than a man should be and heavier than any burial cloth, and carried him beneath the oak where the grass was still soft from the storm, placing him gently on the ground as if he might wake and curse him for bringing the gird so soon. The shovel sank through clay and root with a sound that seemed obscene in the hush, each throw of earth a punctuation to memories that would not stop speaking. The afternoon they'd stolen pie from Ma's windowsill, the time Jonah broke his arm falling from the cider press and Elias held him through the pain until the world righted itself. Now those small mercies were all swallowed by the enormity of what had happened, and Elias felt their absence like a missing lamb. Martha came out without a sound, apron tied, hair knotted as if to hold herself together against whatever came, and for a moment they just stood, 2 figures pressed against the wide sky, the oak casting a long, forgiving shadow over things no forgiveness could fully touch. She did not reach for the shovel or the body. Instead, she folded her hands as if in prayer but did not close her eyes, and when Elias sank to his knees beside the grave, the soil clinging to his palms, he knew the confession would have to be its own sacrament, raw, incomplete, and awful. He had rehearsed none of it. How could a man rehearse the words that would break his mother's heart? So he simply began, the sentence falling from him like a stone. "Mama, I killed my brother to save his soul." The road home felt longer on the second day, as if the plains themselves had stretched out in sympathy with the weight Elias carried. The chestnut mare moved with slow, careful steps, hoofs sinking into ruts the rain had hollowed, and across her back Joanna lay draped like a faded banner, his boots crossed at the ankles, hands pale against his chest, face turned half to the sky as though searching for a sun that no longer shone for him. Elias rode in silence, coat heavy with mud and rain, the town shrinking behind him into a smear of smoke and memory until the open fields of the Reeves place opened up and the oak they'd climbed as boys rose like an old friend against the horizon, its branches hollowed by years but still holding the scars where 2 small hands had once carved initials and promises. The house looked unchanged and yet everything in it had shifted. Martha's kitchen light stood like a solitary lighthouse, and when he eased down from the saddle the world felt sudden and thin, like tissue stretched over a wound. He slid Jonah from the mare with hands that trembled but did not refuse the work, the body lighter than a man should be and heavier than any burial cloth, and carried him beneath the oak where the grass was still soft from the storm, placing him gently on the ground as if he might wake and curse him for bringing the dirt so soon. The shovel sank through clay and root with a sound that seemed obscene in the hush, each throw of earth a punctuation to memories that would not stop speaking. The afternoon they'd stolen pie from Ma's windowsill, That time Jonah broke his arm falling from the cider press, and Elias held him through the pain until the world righted itself. Now those small mercies were all swallowed by the enormity of what had happened, and Elias felt their absence like a missing limb. Martha came out without a sound, apron tied, hair knotted as if to hold herself together against whatever came. And for a moment they just stood, two figures pressed against the wide sky, the oak casting a long, forgiving shadow over things no forgiveness could fully touch. She did not reach for the shovel or the body. Instead, she folded her hands as if in prayer, but did not close her eyes. And when Elias sank to his knees beside the grave, the soil clinging to his palms, he knew the confession would have to be its own sacrament, raw, incomplete, and awful. He had rehearsed none of it. How could a man rehearse the words that would break his mother's heart? So he simply began, the sentence falling from him like a stone. "Mama, I killed my brother to save his soul." Years later, Dust Creek had the look of a place that survived by accident more than by grace. The main street patched with new boards, the saloon sign hanging crooked but defiant, the church rebuilt with hands that trembled but kept hammering, and travelers who passed through liked to stop by the old Reeves place to hear a tale that the wind seemed to tell on its own. The story of two brothers, a preacher who wore a black hat and a promise that went wrong, a night of fire and a quiet grave beneath a nook that still remembered the names carved into its bark. People told it different ways. Some said Elias had slain a mad prophet and saved the town. Others swore Jonah had been the true martyr, taken by a sickness that no sermon could cure. But every telling bent toward the same stubborn ache, a kind of reverence for what love will do when it's the last tool left in a hand. Children asked their parents about the oak that bled red when the sky opened, and the old would smile as Dad smiled and say, "Listen to the wind and you'll hear it," which was their way of keeping the story alive without having to name how ugly mercy can be. Elias kept to the ranch like someone tending a slub-burning lamp. Morning found him at the fence mending the rails his father once taught him to fix. Noon found him in the fields watching the horizon as if looking for a shape that might return. And evening found him on the porch with a cup of coffee gone cold while the sun dropped like an ember behind the hills. His hands were still rough with work but softer in ways only grief can make you. Fingers that had once twitched at the sight of a raised voice now moved steady over the plow. Each motion a small prayer. Each seed planted a stubborn vote for life to go on. People came sometimes, outsiders curious, old friends needing to settle depths with conversation, and once in a while a boy who looked a little like Jonah, eyes too bright for his withered face, and they would ask him what it was like, carrying a body back under an oak or pulling a trigger to stop a man from killing the man he loved. And Elias never gave answers that fit neatly into the maps other folks liked to draw. Instead, he told them about small things, how Jonah used to whistle while he worked, how their mother baked the best bread in county lines that meant anything, how their father's grin could make the world seem easier. Sometimes she'd let the memory of Jonah's laugh stay a moment too long, and you could see the old light in his face like a ghost trying to find a place to rest. The oak remained a sentinel, its trunk scarred where boys had carved initials and where now the soil settled into a low mound that folks still left stones on. And when rain came heavy and the clouds opened, travelers swore the water that ran down the bark took on a tin like iron, and the old man by the stove would chuckle and add, "Some say it bleeds because blood remembers what promises made it." And the children would look up and press hands to the window, half wondering, half afraid. Elias's faith was a quieter thing than it had been. Where once it spoke in prayers loud and angry to a sky that didn't answer, he now found himself in the small, stubborn rituals, feeding the hens, reading aloud from the same worn Bible his mother used to hold, watching the horizon for birds and taking their flight as a good sign. And at night, when the house settled and the wind found its old grooves through the eaves, he would stand by the grave and let the past move through him like smoke, sometimes tasting of forgiveness, sometimes of ash. The town moved on. Laws were mended, grudges softened, but the story didn't leave. It hung in the air like smoke from a long smothered fire, drifting down alleys and into saloons. And every so often a traveler would stop at the gate and lower his voice and ask Elias, "Did you do right?" And Elias would look out at the fields, at the oak, at the place where his brother's shadow once fell, and he'd answer in a voice that was both a surrender and a claim, "I did what I had to, and I keep on." Because keeping is the only prayer that's never answered by strangers. As the sun bled into the west one evening and the sky turned the color of old copper, a breeze moved through the prairie carrying that peculiar hush that feels like a held breath. Elias paused, hand on the rail, and thought he heard a voice so soft he could have missed it if he hadn't been listening all his life. 2 words, no louder than the scrape of a boot in dirt. "You saved me, brother." He closed his eyes and let the whisper pass through him, a warmth and a wound, and when he opened them the light had faded to a slow ember across Dust Creek, the smoke of memory curling up and away, leaving behind a place that held both what was lost and what was learned. The tale faded then, like smoke in a night that remembers both fire and the hands that tried to put it out, bittersweet and haunted and human, as every good legend ought to be. If this story stirred a memory or two, saddle up with us again. Hit subscribe and help keep these old frontier tales alive. Out here, every name, every trail, every sunset still matters. So till we meet again, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past and your heart pointed west.